Welcome to Exploring Digital with Purr, a podcast for entrepreneurs and CEOs who want their businesses to benefit from a digital-first approach. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Exploring Digital with Purr. I'm joined today by Roberto D'Andrea, who is the Strategic Creative Director at Purr London. Hi, Roberto. Or Rob.
Hi, how you doing?
Very well, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Do you want to kick us off today by explaining a little bit about your background and how you came to be a founder at Purr London?
Yeah, so I've been in this industry now for 35 years, and I've done the rounds a little bit. So I started in a packaging company originally in Holland Park, and then I moved from there and I did corporate communications. I was a senior designer at a company called SAS that went on to be quite successful and bought out by Publicis. And then I joined the advertising agency BBH, and I worked for an offshoot of BBH, working in retail. So, working with the likes of Levi's, Nike, Ray-Ban. And then that part of the company of BBH was bought by Identica, Michael Peters, and just got this really broad experience as I went through my career as an employee. And then it just was time. It was just the right time, right people, right place. I met some friends, that wanted to do the same thing. They were actually quite old friends of mine that I'd met early on in my career. And we decided through conversation, let's just give it a go. Let's go on a bit of an adventure.
And that was 20 years ago now, is that right?
That's 20 years. It's our 20th anniversary this year.
Oh, congratulations. Big achievement.
Thank you. So we, if I'm honest, when we set up, it was just the adventure. We really didn't know. We didn't have a business plan as such. We just threw ourselves into it.
So it wasn't like you came. So obviously you'd had this, this 15 years of experience in, big brands, existing agencies, and it wasn't like you took away. I want to do things differently necessarily. It was just that we're in this for the adventure rather than here was a list of things you wanted to change about the industry.
I think, if I'm honest, I had a very strong view of what good work was, and I was very committed to doing great work. And I had business partners as well that were very conscientious. And I think we just wanted to make our mark and own it, do it our way. And I suppose, none of us were particularly materialistic. None of us were, I had two partners, really good friends of mine, Ben and Eddie. And we were never particularly materialistic. Of course, we wanted to have a good business. Of course, we wanted to make money. But I wouldn't necessarily say that was our primary motivation. It was more the adventure of it, and we wanted to do great work and build a reputation. And then I suppose we just felt that the rest would come. It would just take care of itself. And so we stayed together as a three for about 6 or 7 years, and then Eddie, my other partner, he stayed in the business until 2016, and then he just felt it was time to go and do something else. And it was never, ever really my intention to be a sole owner of a company. I mean, absolutely terrified me, the thought of doing it on my own. Even when Eddie decided to sort of go separate ways, it was something that just hadn't occurred to me.
Yeah, it's quite a familiar story. I think the same thing happened to me. Started with three of us, but fortunately, I guess it lasted 2 months with three of us, and then I stuck with it. So it was the norm from very early on, fortunately.
It's partnership is hard. It's really hard. I mean, I've got huge respect for my old partners, but I'm sure I drove them to distraction. And it is really, really hard. It is more than a marriage. I mean, when you really care, when you really throw yourself into it, it's a huge, huge commitment. I heard this quote years ago that a man with a partner is a man with a master. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your partner is the dominant force. All it means is that you have this consideration, that is always in your life. You always have to respect and pander to a partner and their view and what they want and what they need. And so it's a it's something you carry with you, and it's when you go on holiday, when you make any business decision, you always have to consider somebody else.
Yeah,
And
completely.
that's a good thing, and that's sometimes a bad thing. And in many ways now, I love being on my own. I love being able to make the decisions on my own. But equally, I miss my partners, because sometimes two heads are better than one. There's no doubt about it. So it's been a bit of a journey, but we're here, and
So you're coming up to 5 years of doing it sort of as solo director.
yeah.
Has the kind of ethos or purpose of the business changed fundamentally since then? Have you taken it in a different direction, or is it still the same kind of underlying business really?
I think the in in some respects no, but the business landscape is determining our future to a large extent. Um, Again, the basic principles are in place, which is that I want to grow our business. I want to make us a bigger business and a stronger business. But it's the work that motivates me. It's the project work that ultimately is what puts a spring in your step. It's not necessarily the deals. And getting a deal over the line is an amazing feeling. Don't get me wrong. It's often a huge relief if you get a big contract, but it's not comparable with having great work that's respected, and also as well, just going through the creative process. I actually teach at Ravensbourne now, and Ravensbourne University, and really that has made me question creativity again. That's really got me in touch with the next generation on a deeper level, and it's just so rewarding. And I'd actually probably forgotten that a little bit, if I'm honest. And so that's really sort of reignited the passion, if you like, for doing great work and surprising creative um, project work. So yeah,
It's good to be sort of back on the tools for the soul every now and then.
yeah, completely. And just staying in touch, keep your hand in. Because obviously running a company, I get sidetracked all the time. I mean, I won't bore you with it, but this morning,
No, I
this
understandable. Like,
morning, this morning has taken up my time. I've been actually talking about professional indemnity insurance this morning. So there are things that I could do without, and
I think that's one to do with. That's quite an important one.
yeah. So when you get on, as I say, when you get onto the project work, that's when it all becomes worthwhile. And I think at the moment, I think it's incredibly, it's much more fulfilling now probably than it's ever been. And we'll come onto it no doubt as we talk through this. But I think with the way that businesses are having to change now and the way they're having to communicate on what they stand
Yep,
for me, it feels like 20, 25 years ago, a lot of what we were doing was
ahead
considered
of its time.
more, yeah, considered, well, also as well, I think the way people talked about purpose then and the way they talk about it now are probably different things. And I think that back then, a lot of what we were doing was probably perceived as being tomorrow's chip paper,
Yeah.
whereas now it's just much more fundamental to the success of a business.
So whereas 20 years ago, a purpose might be a wishy-washy mission statement and some loose kind of association with a CSR policy of some sort. What are you doing now that's different, or what do you think that the market's doing differently about purpose? How has that conversation about purpose in a branding perspective changed?
I think that it's a good question, and obviously I thought about this before we got together today. I think that purpose back then, more often than not, a business came to you and said, "We need to go to market, we need to have a story, and we need to get ourselves out there." And because of my BBH days, we were always the BBH were very, very clever, and they were always very good at identifying a core proposition, a core meaning for a product, a core strength, if you like, of that product and what it stood for. But it was very product focused. It was very much a purpose
Yeah,
around.
not much about the brand or the business.
Exactly. It wasn't really, and it wasn't necessarily linked to doing good. So, for example, you know, if you think about, if you do, I mean, the usual suspects, but if you think about a Nike and you think about just do it, you know, how much good is in that? You know, there's almost like to a large extent a selfishness about it. You know, it's
Yeah,
like,
almost
just do
inherently
it.
selfish. Yeah.
Yeah, just take it, just go for it, just do it. You know, don't worry about upsetting people, just get on with it, just do it. And now what's happening is that, you know, whatever those 3 or 4 little words are that we're trying to distill a brand down to, it's much more linked to the good that that brand is engaged with. And with a bit of luck, if you get it right, a core proposition speaks about what a business stands for, but it also talks about the benefit of a product as well, if that makes sense. So what we're finding is that our clients, a lot of our clients actually are still not engaged with purpose. They still don't even know what purpose is. It's amazing. It really is amazing how few of them really understand the importance of brand communication and how consumers are, to an extent, looking for brands that do good and have a
Mm.
sustainability story, or they have a, you know, they have a commitment to doing
Yeah,
um,
ethical work
an
or
ethical, yeah, they have an ethical side to their business, and you know, we're having to actually explain that still to a lot of our clients. And don't get me wrong, you know, I read a really good article the other day by Mark Ritson, and he was saying, you know, that if Boohoo are offering an £8 halter neck top, you know, and it's £8, you know, how much are certain consumers really bothered by what you stand for and your employment, you know, ethics and how
yeah,
you get things produced in other countries? You know,
of
oh,
course.
there's an £8 top. I really like that. I love that
It's
neckline. You know,
yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy, I guess, in the market at the moment. You've got equally a kind of a responsibility for big brands to show that they are, aware or at least thinking about some of the social kind of dilemmas that are ongoing. And at the same time, you've got established brands that might have more ethical hiring policies or forced labor policies being taken over by brands that really don't have those.
yeah.
And so the success is coming to the ones that haven't bothered with those, and yet perhaps their increased exposure is what's going to force them to adapt and quickly.
I think we're quite typical of many agencies that are out there, you know, small to medium sized agencies that actually, you know, I wouldn't put myself on a pedestal and say we're sustainability experts. But what I would say is that with every project that we do, we set out to get clients to think about doing good more and presenting themselves in a way that is appropriate for the modern world. Because
Can you give any examples of some of the sustainability work you've done recently for brands?
so we are, I can't give away too much. I can't say too much about this one project, but we're doing a massive project at the moment with a renewable energy company, renewable energy broker called SCB, in Switzerland. They're in Lausanne in Switzerland, and they're a client that we've had. They're a really good example, actually, of how landscapes have changed. So they are one of our founding clients, and we've worked with them for many years. And initially, they were brokering renewable energy, but they were also still brokering oil. They were still doing, you know, very sort of traditional fuel sources, if you like. And
Yeah, carbon heavy stuff.
yeah, yeah, and you know, but they really know their stuff. They really understand, you know, the benefits of renewable energy and how we can tackle our future, if you like, with sort of a different approach. And one of the things that we've been working with them on is a carbon offsetting brand. And as I say, I can't say too much about it at the moment, but because we're about to launch it in March, and we're trying to sort of make carbon offsetting much more front and centre with consumers. And carbon offsetting essentially has got quite a bad rap, actually. There is a perception that you shouldn't be telling somebody to drive a diesel car at any cost. Just get rid of your diesel car and go and buy a Tesla. But actually,
so the kind of the it's a longer term thing to carbon offset something. It doesn't happen immediately.
yeah. But actually, there is still a responsibility for everybody to offset their Tesla. And that still has some sort of carbon trail. That still has some sort of so offsetting can be applied to anything. And what's really interesting about offsetting is that you not only can become carbon neutral, you can actually be in the black. You can actually be positive. So that's been a really, really interesting project that we're working on, and now we're sort of talking about doing very similar things with pets and pet foods. And we've just been approached about a pet food project, which is quite an interesting one, which is a much more sustainable product. So it can be quite sort of far-reaching, but also as well we can be, as I say, it's not just about sustainability. Sometimes our purpose can be rooted in, it can be much more about doing good. So, for example, we had an estate agent approach us, and we've looked at their, if you like, core purpose, and they have. This is how do I explain this? They have a really difficult task at the moment. Estate agents, again, they don't have necessarily the best reputation. The market is unbelievably cluttered, and how
How do they differentiate themselves?
how does anyone differentiate? How does anyone differentiate? So what we've been trying to do is find that core differentiator that really looks after a customer and that is genuinely doing good for those customers. And we think we've hit on something. Again, that's something we're about to launch, which I can't say too much about. But so it's not always a sustainability story. It can actually be about behaviours. And the one thing that I would say about purpose is that my frustration with it is that I think a lot of people talk about purpose now. If I hear one more person say walk the walk, I think I'm going to go mad. We know that. We know you've got to walk the walk. But as agencies, don't just keep going into clients talking about walking the walk. Clients know that, we know that, consumers know that. My frustration is that as agencies, what we've got to be really careful of is that we don't keep talking about the practicalities, because what you're actually doing is you're forgetting that you're an agency that's there to dramatise a purpose. You're an agency that is there to fundamentally bring a purpose to life and make it exciting and interesting. And that means great creativity, great ideas. And don't hide behind this wall of conversation around walk the walk. You've got to do X, Y, and Z, change your business model. I mean, the amount of times we've tried to influence or affect a client with their purpose that then might have a profound effect on their business model is we've done that many times, and that's a very difficult conversation. And often clients just do not want you walking in the room doing that. They've employed you to tell their story and communicate. That's what they want you to do. But that said, is we do sort of fall into that management consultancy role. We
Yeah,
do.
it is transformational, certainly. I mean, because
It's yeah,
otherwise, we come back to your term of differentiation. You know, how to if everyone's introduced sustainability as some extra consideration of their business purpose, then there's no difference again, right? Everyone's got it as another facet of their business. Whereas if you genuinely reinvent the business model with sustainability as one of its new tenets, then yeah, you are offering something different to what the competition is because it's actually been embedded into the overall business, not just as
yeah.
some extra consideration.
Don't get me wrong. I think we have to fight the fight. We have a responsibility to influence our clients, but I think sometimes you have to be quite subtle about it.
Yeah.
Also, I've attended various events or summits where it's been around purpose, and you have various speakers, and that's from the agency world, that's from the creative
Mhm.
agency world, and the consultancy world, if you like. And I've attended many of these things, and the repetition is unbelievable. And the repetition centers around walking the walk. And I've attended those events often because I want to be inspired by great creativity and people that bring those stories to life in a way that I haven't seen before. And that's my worry at the moment, is that a lot of agencies are hiding to some extent behind the strategic approach and the practicality, and actually forgetting about the bit that clients will really get excited about, and it's how do you actually deliver this,
Yeah.
and that can be you know great ideas, great activations, that have a profound effect on how you walk the walk. You know, so it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, it's I mean, sustainability is a topic we've talked to clients about, and it has. I think initially it was something of a just a oh, we're aware that this is something that people are pushing for, even in a tech perspective. You know, what is the carbon footprint of your website? What can we do to reduce that at a server level or at a page speed score? You know, all those things that are just a very kind of well, yes, they are primarily for all sorts of other purposes, and yet they have a sustainability, additional benefit. Um, but then there's another facet to our business, which is well, building internal business systems and processes and software and automation. Uh, and whilst people have traditionally looked at those from a profitability or an efficiency perspective, I think there's going to be an increasing drive for it feels just transformational at the moment if you consider what's being talked about at a US government level, British government level, post COVID, and our kind of drive to rebuild the British economy. It feels like sustainability could be quite the core of a number of things we're talking about, and I don't know how that's encouraged, but it feels like people might be making technology decisions as well as purpose and branding decisions from a sustainability perspective. And so we want to be on top of that too. But it's going to be fascinating to see how people are not just well, are they going to be encouraged? Is it going to be just left to people to do, or are there going to be I don't know tax breaks or schemes to encourage people to really consider it? I don't yet know how it's measurable or quantifiable, or is it just people's perception of a brand that makes a
Yeah,
difference?
I think again, there's no silver bullet, is there? There's going to be a combination of measures, and I mean, I go back to the offsetting story a moment ago, where I mean, there's recent evidence from the UN that offsetting actually could be a really positive way forward. Um, but I don't sit here and say that's the only answer.
Yeah,
There's all kinds of things that can be done, whether it be at a corporate level or a governmental level, that can drive that change. But I think it's really interesting times. We're still. I suppose what I'm trying to say is we're still trying to find our feet in terms of what actually works. And part of the equation is going to be just stop doing what you're doing. There are going to have to be certain sacrifices, but business is not going to shut down overnight. It's
yep.
just not going to happen. So we have to be more responsible in terms of just how we go about business, you know.
Touching on those sacrifices you mentioned, I mean, are there limitations you think you're up against when you suggest a branding strategy to a client or a branding process to a client? Do you have to kind of tiptoe around some aspects of their business?
Um, Again, it I think we'll always voice our opinion. We'll always say what we think. We'll always be frank with a client. And I think on the very odd occasion when we've looked into a client's eyes and it's all been about making money, we've probably not worked with that client for much longer. And that's becoming more the case again as we go forward. I would say the last 10 projects we've been approached with, 20 maybe, I don't know, but overwhelmingly now clients they're on board, they're already on board, and they want to be much more purpose driven, and they want the world to know that they're much more conscientious in the marketplace. So it's not like we're having to navigate around anything particularly at the moment. You know, most of our clients they're in the right space. As I said earlier, there are a few of them that don't really understand what purpose actually is from a marketing point of view. They don't understand how it can actually work in their favor. And so, for example, you could go and spend thousands and thousands of pounds doing an advertising campaign, or you could spend thousands of pounds creating an engagement event, an engagement tool, something that really sort of gets you on board with your audience or
Yep.
audiences, whether it be internal or external. And you can redeploy your marketing budget in such a way where whatever it is you're executing, it becomes shareable. So there is no need for advertising. And we'll be honest with clients. If we see those opportunities, we'll tell them that. You know, so it's not all again about us taking the budget and divvying it up as best we can within Bear. It's about giving them the best advice as to how they can go forward. But more importantly, it's about getting them to understand the opportunities. And when we sort of come in the room, and I don't think many of them are particularly. They're still not quite up to speed. A lot of them. You've got to remember, a lot of our clients are. So we will work for big businesses. So we've not long worked for music licensing, and we worked with PPL, rebranded PPL, rebranded PRS, and did a JV project, which was about basically streamlining the music licensing experience for businesses. I mean, this is £1 billion worth of business every year to the UK economy. And so these guys there's actually, scrap that. It's not £1 billion to the economy. They're £1 billion businesses combined. And I think the thing about a business like that is, again, it goes back to this thing about purpose. What was their purpose? Their purpose was fair value for a musician for the work that they do. You know, we work for very small businesses, and the smaller businesses and the startups, again, often just they have no idea about, you know, how to communicate, and they have very little idea about core purpose. Whereas the bigger businesses are obviously a bit more sophisticated, and they have quite, you know, sort of sophisticated marketeers within their business already. So it's possible.
So for small businesses out there that haven't really got their heads around it, I mean, other sustainability is definitely one of the big opportunities, but are there others that you're recommending at the moment? I mean, what would you say are the biggest opportunities for businesses to consider, you know, for that branding and purpose perspective over the next year?
Um, Biggest opportunities? Wow, that's a question. I think it depends on the sector. It just depends on the sector. I mean, we talked about estate agency a moment ago and just how cluttered it is, and the onliners have steamed in like your purple bricks, and they've not necessarily completely eradicated the high street agent because people still want that personal experience.
Hmm.
And it just depends on where you are and who you're talking to. I think,
Well, I mean, there must be some commonality across sort of similar, not retail necessarily, but high street businesses being, the major story is that anyone who had premises before is now being overtaken by people who didn't have that overhead over the last year. Um, and there is a future for those businesses, but they've got to communicate why you should justify continuing to spend money with them. Um, so that yeah, there are opportunities for everyone, I guess. But as you say, industry specific or means of means the touch points that they've already got. It's going to be dictated by those to a certain extent.
yeah, I think retail's a really interesting one because, you know, pre-pandemic, you could still go to Oxford Street and you could still see how
Shouldn't, but yeah.
unbelievably packed it was because it's that day out experience.
Mm,
And so it's just about finding that balance between how much do we give people the physical experience, how much do we give them the digital experience. And obviously what this has done is this whole pandemic has accelerated the digital experience. I think what it's actually done is it's ultimately inspired confidence in customers to shop digitally on the
yeah,
whole, and it's an obvious thing to say, but I think there are a lot of technophobes out there that just wouldn't hit the internet. And
yeah,
now it's almost like it's just got them over that tipping point. And I think that where brands have a decision to make is how much do we want to pay for those premises? How much do we want to pay for those overheads? Offices and office space for a lot of businesses, retail space is the burning question at the moment because that's aside from wages, that is your biggest overhead invariably. And is it worth it? Only those individual businesses know that.
yeah. So is digital or tech becoming a larger part of when you're working on purpose or strategy with a brand? Is adoption of digital becoming an increasing part? Do you think, just considering what we've seen over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of have done. It's a really good question because again, there are you've got quantitative and you've got qualitative data that you can look into, and working out what your customer personas are using data is something that we're quite big on. We really try and get an understanding of who your audiences are. If you've got a business, you've got internal audiences, you've got external audiences, and we really try to understand who we're talking to and what their needs are. What is the problem we are trying to solve? You know, whether you're a watch company and I need to get watches on somebody's wrists, or whether you are a service driven business, what is the problem we are trying to solve? And the only way you can often um, understand that is by talking to audiences and also talking to people on the coalface, talking to sales teams, and that can often involve data, and it can often involve getting those insights in terms of direct feedback. So we front end when we're going through the strategic process, technology plays a big part. We often work with media partners as well, so we don't do it all in house, and we get they're much better at it than we are in some respects. So we get them to sort of look at demographics, look at behaviours. There's a lot of talk at the moment about behaviours and less about demographics. You know, is it about somebody that's 25 to 30, or is it about their behaviours? So we say we do pay more attention to people's behaviours, as I say, and again, technology plays a big part in that. And then, of course, there's the production of what we do, and technology plays a big part in things as well. Whether that be sitting at a Mac all day, or whether that be, sort of filmmaking or whatever it might be. The one thing that I would say is that in some respects, we keep certain things analog. So when you're sitting at a computer, it can be your worst enemy. So from a creative point of view, it's very easy to end up looking at things in a very linear way, page by page by page by page. And one of the things that we believe in, certainly when we go back into our office, is
print everything out.
Print it out and just have an overview. And that is, I know we should be working towards being a bit more paperless, but it's the best way. It's the best way to cross-reference your ideas. So we're quite old school in that respect.
No, it's hard to get enough onto a screen sometimes for it to be meaningful. And completely agree. Computers can be your worst enemy, certainly from a developer perspective. So go on. If you were going to give a top tip for brands this year about a branding opportunity or a purpose question, what would you say would be the one take home you'd give to a small business?
My top tip is that there's if you don't know your purpose, identify it and get help. If you do know it, which a lot of businesses do have an understanding of it, as we've discussed, don't keep going back to the purpose. Don't keep banging on about what that purpose is and how you're going to walk the walk. Make it interesting to your customers. Tell the story, dramatize it, bring it to life. We all know that there are opportunities out there for digital activations. We all know about the digital landscape and what that can do for you. And often that goes beyond the realms of a creative agency. That's very much about product development. But I'm still a real believer in the personality of a brand and how consumers attach themselves to the badge, how they attach themselves to a brand that is cool or not cool, and so don't forget that. That would be my top tip, is that I think don't get too practical. Don't keep immersing yourself in practicalities. Express yourself.
Good advice. I will be taking it on and reviewing our purpose immediately after this. Rob, thank you so much for the chat today. It's been fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for the time. I've enjoyed it.
Best of luck in 2021. Thanks for joining. Remember to subscribe and follow us, and to share today's insights with other businesses you know who want to stay relevant in a digital-first world.